Heaven and Hell by E. A. Wallis Budge. Volume 3 is the contents of the books of the other world described and compared. Chapter 5 is the contents of the book Am-Tuat and the book of Gates compared. The western vestibule or antechamber of the Tuat. Having already briefly described the general character of the book Am-Tuat and the book of the Gates, we may pass at once to the comparison of their contents. For the sake of convenience in describing the various divisions of the Tuat, let us assume that we are occupying the position of a disembodied spirit who is about to undertake the journey through the Tuat, and that we are standing at the entrance of the first division, awaiting the arrival of the boat of the sun entity, Yuf, on which we hope to have permission to travel. Every funeral rite has been duly and adequately performed. The relatives and friends of the deceased have made the legally appointed offerings and said all the prayers proper for the occasion. Amulets inscribed with magical names and formula have been attached to the body. Copies of sacred writings have been laid on it, or near it, in the tomb. The priests have said the final words, which will secure for a soul a passage in the boat of Ra, and a safe conduit, and a safe conduct to the abode of the blessed, whether the abode be in the boat itself or in the kingdom of Yesir, Osiris, or so they thought that this was going to be the case. The result of all these things is that we have been enabled to pass through the boat, through the tomb, out into the region which lies immediately to the west of the mountain chain on the west bank of the Nile, which we may consider as one mountain and may call Manu, or the mountain of the sunset. Remember what I said about don't worship God, Manu, Mani, that's sort of what's thought, and Mani was thought of in female terms. God was thought of in male terms. At this place are gathered together numbers of spirits, all bent on making their way to the abode of the blessed. These are they who have departed from their bodies during the day, and they have made their way to the sacred place in western Thebes, where they can join the boat of the sun entity. Some are adequately equipped with words of power and amulets, and their ultimate safety is assured, but others are less well provided, and it will be the fate of many of these to remain in the place where they now are, and never to enter the house of Yesir or the boat of Ra. They will not suffer in any way whatsoever, but will simply remain there, protecting themselves as best they can by any words of power they may possess until such a time as they are overcome by some hostile being, when they will die and take their place among other dead spirits, having failed to present themselves in the judgment hall of Yesir. And so the Egyptian Manu Ktper Nut Manuper. No, so those two variations there. Now the dead, who are in the various divisions of the Tuat, do not apparently pass entirely out of existence, for, as we shall see later, they are not revivified once each day by light which the sun entity casts upon them as he passes through the Tuat, and for a season they enjoy his rays, and when he leaves one division to enter another, the gate closes on him and shuts out his light, and they set up dismal cries at its departure, and they sink down into the inertness in the darkness which will swallow them for 24 hours. It is possible that the dead here referred to represent the primitive inhabitants of the country, and the entities of the dead whom they worshipped when on earth. But there is no doubt that to these were joined the spirits of those who, for some reason or other, failed to advance beyond one or another of the divisions of the Tuat. So this dying and resurrecting sort of entity, the sun dying, this is sort of... But before that and after that, most interestingly, before that, we have the idea of, wait, They knew the world was round. They knew the sun just rose and set on different locations constantly. Apparently, a lot of the ancients did. So maybe we're thinking of something metonymially, a metaphor of some sort. Okay. So, now, however, the time of the evening has come, and the sun entity in the Sektet boat, wherein he has traveled since noon, draws nigh, flooding the first division of the Duat with light. This division, or antechamber, or vestibule of the Duat, is, according to the book Am-Tuat, called Ra. And before the sun entity can come to the dweller of the Duat, he must pass over a space which is said to be 120 or 220 Gitru, or leagues in length. The river Wernus, on which the boat moves, is 300 Gitru in extent, and is divided in two portions. You know, the Nile, the White Nile, and the Green Nile, right? On looking into the boat of the sun entity, we see that this entity has transformed himself, and that he no longer appears as a fiery disk, but as a ram-headed man, who stands within a shrine. In other words, Ra has taken the form of Yisur, in order that he may pass successfully through the kingdom of the dead, whose supposed Lord and God is Yisur. The name given this form is Yuf, or Yifu, a plural of flesh, I guess, which literally means flesh, and a dead body. It was a dead body that Yisur first entered. It was as a dead body that Yisur first entered the Duat, and that those who wished to become what he became subsequently had to enter the Duat as dead bodies. And with the attributes wherewith he entered it, the boat then contains the body of the dead sun entity, or Yifu Ra. He has with him a crew of 7 entities and 7 demons and 1 demoness. One of these acts as a guide. Yip-Uat. I think I said the wrong sounds. Another is a steersman, another as the lookout, and the demoness, or lady of the boat, is there as representative of the division through which they are about to pass. Besides these, we have Ka-Shu, the devil of Shu, the devil of the spirit, the entity, the atmosphere of this world, who is present in the boat, in order to supply the entity with air. Haru Haknu, who recites magical formula, and Sa and Hu, which represent knowledge and intelligence necessary for the due performance of the journey. We may note that the boat moves by itself, and that the entities who form a procession in front of it do not tow it. As we have already described these in Volume 1, see pages 4 through 8, it is needless to say here more than that they are all forms of the sun entity, are deified aspects of him, and that they accompany their Lord, liege lord, who has transformed himself. How are we going to transform? Side by side with the boat of Yifu Ra is a smaller boat in which the coming into being of Yisur is depicted, and the beetle is there to typify the presence of Yisur and to lead Yifu Ra on his way through the division. As Yifu Ra is preceded by a number of forms, the sun entity, so the form of Yisur, Kspur-na Yisur, is preceded by a number of Osirian deities, or as they're thought of as deities. Remember, deity, a functionary of worship. It's not that an actual god can't be a deity, it's that it goes beyond just being a deity. 3 snakes and 3 demonesses, among them being Nech of the north, Nech of the south, and the rare demoness Artet. See Volume 1, page 7. I've already shared this part. the direction in which Yifu-Ra is moving in the northwards, and we may glance at the beings who are on the banks of the river of the Duat. On the right hand are 9 apes. Jahute, remember, the ape of Thoth myth, which sing to Ra as he entereth the Duat. The apes that make a bunch of racket in the sunrise. 9 demons and 12 demonesses who sing praises unto Ra, and 12 serpents which belch forth the fire that gives light to lighten the entity on his way. The jinn are fire beings, so good or bad, they have a fire of their own realm. It's not just, when I talk about clay beings, there's a soul side of us that's not material. And even the other incarnate beings and the fire beings and the light beings, I don't mean all of, definitely the fire being and the light being, I don't mean that in terms of this world. Volume 1, page 12 through 15. On the left hand are 9 eights which open the gates to the great soul, Yifu-Ra. 12 demonesses who open the gates in the earth, 12 demonesses who guide the entity, and the 9 demons who praise Ra, Volume 1, page 9 through 11. As soon as Yifu-Ra has entered the division, Arit, he calls upon the entities to let him proceed, and he asks for light and guidance from them. He bids one set of apes to open the doors to him, and the other to welcome him, as he is provided not only with the word of power, but has the knowledge how to utter it. The entity straightway bid him to enter the place where Yusur the Yamante dwells. Think about Aleister Crowley for a second. Aleister Crowley was one of those figures that he kind of he said things that sounded really offensive that didn't really mean as offensive as they were. He was just trying to liberate the terms. And I guess the ape throwing its filth and stuff like this, it represents something more than just something mischievous and not a good example for humans, right? So anyways, I think I'll break this chapter into 2. The serpent demoness is sing hymns to him, and they lighten the darkness by pouring out fire from their mouths. The entity takes possession of the grain which is in Nitra. His word has its effect upon everyone, and the punishments in which he judges to the condemned are carried out duly. As for the dead who are in this division, they do not journey on with the entity, but they are left behind, and when they see him pass through the fortified gate which guards the entrance to the second division, they wail. Volume 1, page 20. The texts say nothing about the actual condition of the dead whom Yifu-Ra leaves behind him, and nothing of the place or places whence they came. We can only assume that they are those for who, some reason or other, have failed to obtain a seat in the boat of the entity. They must not be confounded with the entities, with the demons and demonesses and apes who were in attendance upon Yifu-Ra, for these are in reality officers of the division whose duty it is to escort him to the gate of the second division, and they return to their places to await his return the following evening. In return for their services, they receive food and drink by the command of this entity. As the boat of Yifu-Ra was assumed by the priest of Yemen-Ra to begin the journey through the Duat at Thebes, and as we are expressly told that the entity was obliged to pass over a space of 120 or 220 yitru, or leagues, before he came to the dwellers of the Duat, it is probable that the first group of the dead are those who entered the Duat through the opening in the mountains behind Idus, which was called Gop. The oldest entity of the dead by Abydus was Kante Yamante, the governor of Yamante. Yamante, i.e. the hidden land, being a name for the underworld, or otherworld in general. This being so, it is clear that when Yifu-Ra came to the end of the first division of the Duat, he arrived at the beginning of the dominions of Kante Yamante, whose attributes became absorbed subsequently into those of Yasir. In the Book of Gates, the first division is depicted in a different manner. The boat of the sun is seen passing through the mountain of the horizon, which is divided into two parts. The entity appears in the form of a beetle within a disc, which is surrounded by a serpent with voluminous folds. The only entities with him in the boat are Sa and Haka. Here the personifications of the intelligence and the word of power. So Sa and Haka are essentially magic. The duty of Sa is to make all plans for the entity's journey, and Haka will utter the words of power, which will enable him to overcome all opposition. So, intention and action. On each half of the mountain is a scepter, one having the head of a jackal, the other that of a ram. Each scepter is supported by the entity Tat and the entity Set, the personifications of the Duat and the mountain respectively. One scepter is mentioned in the text, which is somewhat obscure in meaning. It seems, however, that the jackal-headed scepter uttered words on the behalf of the entity Yifu Ra, and that the other typified him, taking place of the ram-headed entity with a human body, which we have in the book Am-Tuat. On each side of the boat are 12 entities who presumably represent the 12 hours of the day and the 12 hours of the night. One group is called Natru Set, or Smt, i.e., the so-called gods of the mountain, of the hidden land. The entities of the mountain are the offspring of Ra himself, and they emerge from his eye, and to them is Am-Tuat has been given as an abode. So one of the things that's important when you look at your own mythology, monotheist or polytheist, it's important, or if you're looking at these things psychologically, it's important to involve a wholeness in the operation, in the, operations, what's coming next. I don't know how to phrase this quite right, but I hope one would get the idea. The doctrine of making one. It's not that, if there is one God, all the divine attributes are in one. There was a Natura Nefria cult in California that I was in touch with for some time over the internet. I think they had a center, I believe. I'm not sure if they still have their center. Rents have gone up everywhere, but if they paid for it, that part's taken care of. But they saw, all these Macs, all these zoomorphic forms, all these plant and mineral form ideas. It's like these are just terms being used. The real divinity is, all of it. This is all just one. Or they saw them as a unity. I guess maybe there could have been a difference in the congregation of using the ancient Egyptian forms and names to represent, hey, this is divinity, we're serving divinity, we're enacting these things, we're bringing out these things in ourselves, and the ancient Egyptians had sort of a way for us, so I don't remember quite how that cult went, but I will obviously continue here with chapter 6, which will be part 8 of the second division of Duat, the kingdom of Kunte Yamante Yasir, according to the book Am-Tuat, and Sharma. Peace be upon you.